Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel, where today we're going to explore just some of the mysteries of Lake Superior. There are so many strange stories surrounding this lake, which we're going to take a deep dive into in today's video. Deep dive, get it? I'm trying to be funny. The Great Lakes of North America are a series of large interconnected freshwater lakes, all of which connect the Atlantic Ocean through the St. Lawrence River. They all sit on or are near the Canada-United States border, Lakes Michigan, Huron, Erie, Ontario and Superior, which is going to be our focus today. Lake Superior is the largest of the Great Lakes, and it's actually the world's largest freshwater lake by surface area and the third largest freshwater lake by volume. Its north shore borders Ontario, Canada, whilst it's surrounded by Minnesota, Wisconsin and Michigan in the USA. In terms of comparison, just so you can get a real idea of just how big this lake is, it would cover pretty much the entirety of the Midlands and Wales here in the UK and more. Or if you want a more USA friendly comparison, it's greater than the areas of Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut and New Hampshire combined. It holds 3 quadrillion gallons of water and makes up 10% of the world's entire freshwater surface, and unlike most lakes, it even has its own tide. Of course, this video is sponsored by Magellan TV, who I have a long-standing sponsorship with. They're a streaming service dedicated purely to documentaries, and each month, I like to make a recommendation of a couple of documentaries that I think you should watch, starting this month with A Shallow Grave. Apparently I was on a real true crime documentary kick this month, because this is actually the first of 2 true crime documentaries I want to share with you today. So, A Shallow Grave is about a man called Alex Steenkamp, whose body was buried in a shallow grave in the garden of a house in Brixton for 8 whole years. His wife insisted from day one that she knew who her husband's murderer was. It was a police informant, but nobody would listen to her, and this documentary just explores exactly why this was, what happened. I don't want to say any more than that because, spoilers, but it was a fantastic watch. And the second recommendation I have is Night Terror, The Search for the Truth, which is much shorter, only 24 minutes long, but it's very easily digestible and just as thrilling. It's about the double murders of 2 successful gay men called Brett Golden and Richard Bloom in Cape Town in South Africa, and the whole media storm that came along with this. The media shared way more than they should have done and essentially compromised the entire investigation. And it's just a very different angle to look at true crime from. A lot of the time we criticise media for not sharing enough, for not caring enough, but what happens if they share too much? Magellan TV have everything from true crime, science, history, nature and everything in between, with new programmes added weekly that can be watched anywhere on your TV, laptop and mobile. It's compatible with Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Google Play and iOS, and loads of the programmes are available in 4K as well. If you enjoy what I do here on my channel, then honestly I cannot stress enough how much you'll also enjoy Magellan TV. There's never been a better time to dedicate yourself to education and learning something new. So it's generally thought that lakes are rather calm bodies of water, but that can't be said for Lake Superior. You can literally surf on it if you're brave enough. It's estimated that throughout history, Lake Superior has taken the lives of roughly 10,000 people. There are said to have been about 350 shipwrecks in her waters, but even more creepy is that there are dozens of ships that are said to have just disappeared and not a trace of them has ever been found. Some people suspect that there's a supernatural answer to the lake's strange mysteries, whilst others look for more conventional explanations to the disappearances. But one thing is for sure, Lake Superior never gives up its dead. It's said that once you're lost in there, you're lost forever. This is a lake where horrific storms can start as suddenly as they disappear, storms strong enough to wreck whole ships. So any lone person out for an afternoon swim or a sail stands very little chance. In the winter there are ice volcanoes all along the north shore of the lake, ranging in size from less than 1 metre to 8 metres. These ice volcanoes erupt water, ammonia or methane rather than molten lava. There are rip currents strong enough to take even the most accomplished of swimmers underwater. And it's not just the lake, it's surrounded in parts by vast forests that hundreds of people have also disappeared in. I have many mini mysteries to talk to you about in this video, but we're going to start with Bannockburn, one of the infamous ghost ships of Lake Superior. It's said that she sailed through a crack in the lake, never to be seen again, apart from in the form of ghostly apparitions. This is probably the greatest known story of the lake and one of the biggest mysteries. So the Bannockburn was a Canadian registered freighter ship whose final voyage began at Fort William, Ontario at the Canadian Lakehead on the 20th of November 1902. She was headed for Georgian Bay with a team of 21 sailors and 85,000 bushels of wheat, only of course she would never arrive at her destination. 1902 wasn't the first time that this ship, the Bannockburn, ran into complications on a journey. 5 years earlier, in 1897, the ship was badly damaged when it ran over the shoal near Snake River Lighthouse at full speed. The crew had to dump some of its cargo, but no one was injured and the journey just continued as normal. Then later that very same year, the ship struck something else in the journey and sprung a leak, taking on 9 foot of water. The ship technically sunk that time, but once again the crew was safe and the ship was repaired to sail again another day. Until that fateful night in 1902 when she got caught up in a storm on the lake. And although we have no way of actually knowing what happened, we can draw the conclusion that she sunk and is sat on the bottom of the lake somewhere just waiting for discovery. She took down the crew with her, none of whom were ever discovered either. The Bannockburn was seen a couple of separate times on the day she disappeared. 2 sailors in the British wig reported that they encountered her near Passage Island at 7 AM on the 21st of November. At this time, the ship and its crew seemed healthy and happy and still had its typical load of grain. The last encounter that the Bannockburn had with another ship that day was reported by an upbound passenger steamer named Huron. At approximately 11 PM on the 21st November 1902, the crew of the Huron reported seeing lights in the distance that they presumed to be that of the Bannockburn. These journeys were taking place very late in the season and there weren't that many other ships on the lake at this particular time. Plus their paths would have crossed on their journeys about the time it was reported. So the maths does add up here, it probably was the Bannockburn that they could see. One man aboard the Huron wrote in his journal on November 21st that they had the worst storm of the season that night, writing the next day that the engines of the ship had been damaged by said storm. Bannockburn was due to arrive the following morning at the Sioux Locks, or Sioux Locks? I'm going to say Sioux, but I'm aware it might be wrong. But of course the ship didn't arrive on time. Considering the weather of the previous night, that was expected, so nobody really worried too much. It was only after a few days had passed and there had been no arrival that questions began to arise. As the news began to spread about the disappearance of the Bannockburn, a steamer called John D. Rockefeller reported that on the 25th of November, they passed through a load of floating debris that may well have been that of the missing ship. They didn't think much of it at the time because they hadn't heard any reports of any missing ships. By November 30th, with no sign of the Bannockburn, the ship and its crew were officially announced as lost. Despite some people falsely reporting the ship had been seen safe and sound, it hadn't been. Eventually, investigators came to the conclusion that the ship may have found itself in the dangerous reef around the Caribou Islands in the aftermath of the storm. There was usually a lighthouse to warn ships on this island, but it had been turned off just a few days earlier, and the crew on the Bannockburn was fairly young and inexperienced. They wouldn't have known the lake as well as some older crews may have done. Of course, this is all just a theory, as the ship has never been found and there's been no way of knowing for sure, but maybe it did get into trouble around that area. Perhaps it was just sunk by the storm, perhaps there was a boiler explosion. It could have been any number of things. When the Sioux locks were drained at the end of this season, a hull plate was reportedly found in the lock that supposedly belonged to the Bannockburn, although honestly no sources seem too convinced on that. Without this hull plate though, the ship would have been significantly weaker, so maybe this hull plate had fallen off, nobody had noticed, and then it goes out on a journey, gets into a storm, and can't survive. The story of the Bannockburn could have been the same as so many other ships that got lost to Lake Superior. Even today, they're still finding new wreckages at the bottom of the lake. Apparently, every single spring, a renewed search begins with divers, amateurs, and experienced shipwreck hunters heading to the lake to find their treasure, undiscovered shipwrecks. That's like their ultimate thing. The cold, fresh water of the lake means that the wrecks are generally pretty well preserved down there, and with modern technology, quite a few shipwrecks have been discovered recently, like that of the Antlight, which sprung a leak and sunk in 1897, but finally found in 2016, or the Henry B. Smith, found in 2013, just a few months shy of its 100th anniversary, sinking anniversary that is. Perhaps one day the Bannockburn will be found too, but it's probably lying 1,000 feet deep somewhere 50 miles from land. But you're probably thinking, Georgia, ships sink, there was a storm, this one's not much of a mystery. Well, the Bannockburn's most famous nickname is the Flying Dutchman of the Great Lakes. Within a year of her disappearance, she had a reputation as a ghost ship. Rumour has it that she's been spotted countless numbers of times over the years, just sailing the waters of Lake Superior. Superstition says that seeing any ghost ship on the water is a bad omen, a sign that stormy weather is soon to follow, and so the Bannockburn is now historically associated with bad luck. She's most often spotted between Port Arthur and the Soo Locks, where she should have arrived. One of the most famous stories of the Bannockburn haunting these waters happened shortly after World War II, when the crew of an ore freighter saw the Bannockburn coming straight at them from 100 yards away. The captain was so sure there was about to be a collision that he steered the ship to the northeast, but the Bannockburn just disappeared. Had the ship not changed course, it likely would have run aground and been destroyed by rocks. The Bannockburn saved this ship, even though it is said to be bad luck to see it. Or there's a story from 2016 in which a local videographer called Jason Asselin was filming a rainbow over the lake before noticing this ghost ship, shimmering in the distance off of the shore of Prescott Isle Park in Marquette. He uploaded this footage to YouTube, which I'll include a screenshot of here now to prevent any copyright issues, but it's very easily searchable if you want to go see the whole thing. Jason said the ship was there for almost half an hour before it vanished inexplicably as fast as it appeared. He said that it was a very strange experience, it felt otherworldly. And whilst no one can give a short explanation on what caused this, some scientists say that it may have been somewhat of an optical illusion, an image of the Granite Island Lighthouse, which was about 8 miles away. It appeared in the same way that the moon sometimes appears to be huge on the horizon. This lighthouse appeared to be bigger and ship-like. Or maybe it wasn't at all, maybe it's a lot more fun to think that it was indeed the image of the Bannockburn, it was a ghost ship. And for sure, the lighthouse theory cannot be said for every single time that people have reported seeing a ghost of the Bannockburn on the lake. There's also the story of the SS Kamloops final trip, which left Port Colborne, Ontario on December 1st, 1927, with package freight and 19 men and 2 women aboard. It wasn't going to be too long a trip to end off the season. The captain was expected to be home just over a week later. But on the 4th of December, Captain William Bryan wrote to his wife in Toronto, saying that the weather had been particularly bad and he was headed out to anchor his ship, which would have put a delay on his journey. But the next night, on December 5th, a terrible storm hit, matched with below freezing temperatures and high winds. The temperature only continued to drop as a massive cold front advanced from the northwest, which would be closely followed by another even worse storm. I couldn't think of a worse place to be in a storm than in the middle of a large, unforgiving body of water, especially when said storm lasts for a number of days. In this time that the storm was going on, 5 vessels were officially declared lost by the underwriters, and the Kamloops was reported as missing when it had never arrived in Fort William. Despite a search held by many other ships, it was never found, and the last time it was seen was by the Quebec at 10 PM on December 6th. The Kamloops was seen about a quarter of a mile behind. The Quebec saw a dark mass up ahead and sounded an alarm, having to turn sharply to avoid hitting these rocks. It tried to warn the Kamloops, who wasn't far behind, but visibility was very poor with very thick fog. It's not known if the Kamloops heard the signal or avoided these rocks. It wasn't until the following May that bodies started to turn up. 2 bodies, both wearing life jackets with Kamloops stenciled on them, were reported on the north shore of Isle Royale, not far from where it thought the ship would have gone missing. They also found shipwreckage alongside these bodies, including a lifeboat and oars. A week or so later, 6 more decomposed bodies were found, and then the 9th was found not long after, fairly far inland. It first struck me as strange that no bodies were found for such a long time, only to have so many appear at once. But they did go missing in the winter, and the ice wouldn't melt until springtime, with the fishermen not going out until after then again. All the bodies were discovered by fishermen who were just starting their season. It's thought that all of the people on the lifeboat made it to shore alive, but soon died succumbing to the elements. If they hadn't literally frozen to death, the bodies had been partially eaten by wolves. They do say that Lake Superior never gives up its dead, and it seems that it follows through on its promise here. These bodies were only found because they made it to shore before their death. They just froze. For decades, there was no sign of the ship until August 21st, 1977, when a sport diver finally spotted it at 195 foot during an exploratory dive. The ship was no longer missing, and it was in near perfect condition considering it had been at the bottom of the lake for 50 years. Like I said, Lake Superior is cold. It acts like somewhat of a freezer, preserving its treasure perfectly, including the body of one of the 13 crewmen aboard who had never made it to shore. He had floated inside the ship alone for 50 years, his body now stiff and snow white. The many divers over the years who had come to explore the wreck would nickname him Old Whitey. Of course, this is a mystery video though, so this isn't just any old preserved dead body. The ship was said to be haunted by a ghost who inhabited Old Whitey's body, a ghost which many divers knew to be called Grandpa. The experienced divers who explored the ship would share stories of the ghost, saying they saw him in the crew bunks just quietly watching them explore, or sometimes he would wander the boat as if it was still in full working order. Some would say that Grandpa followed them around, even touching them, and they could feel it. But he never attempted to hurt any of them or appeared upset or angry in any way. Grandpa just followed and watched, probably still does. Many divers have reported seeing him in their logs. Even divers who have gone down there as complete skeptics, they don't believe in ghosts, they don't believe in the supernatural, have come back saying they saw him and now they believe. But let's change angle a bit here, and instead of looking at a weird ship-related mystery, let's take a look at the story of the F-89 jet. It was the 23rd of November 1953, not so shockingly a very stormy night over Lake Superior, when the US Air Defense Command noticed something strange on their radar, a UFO. I think as soon as someone says UFO, your brain always immediately goes to aliens, but really it just stands for Unidentified Flying Object. Something was flying in their airspace, not far from the Sioux Locks, and they didn't know what it was. It was unidentified, it was flying, it was an object. So they scrambled an F-89C Scorpion jet from Kinross Air Force Base in Upper Michigan to go and investigate. Whatever this object on the radar was moving over the lake at 500 miles per hour. Whatever this object was, they had trouble tracking it as it kept changing course over the lake, and they actually pursued it for half an hour before approaching. The radar operators watched closely as the aircraft approached the UFO, and then as the two blips on the screen merged and then disappeared. But then the first blip returned, indicating that this unidentified object had veered off course and then just vanished itself. It had survived whatever made the plane disappear. This all happened about 70 miles off Keweenaw Point in Upper Michigan. All communication with the F-89 ceased immediately, and the two men aboard were never heard from again. Pilot Lieutenant Felix Moncler Jr., who was known to most as Gene, and radar observer Lieutenant R.R. Wilson. They conducted an immediate and extensive aerial search, which revealed no trace of the aircraft. The United States Air Force and the Canadian Air Force taking part, but there was nothing. And then the United States Coast Guard also took part, but they also found nothing. The bad weather conditions at the time may very well have contributed to the inability to find anything. They literally found no clue. The Air Force soon released a statement about this disappearance to the press, stating their original version of the story I just told you a moment ago. But then they retracted this, saying they had indeed successfully completed their mission to identify this object. According to them, it was just a Royal Canadian Air Force C-47 aircraft that happened to be flying some 30 miles off course, and that the F-89 had disappeared on its way back to base, with the pilot stricken with sudden vertigo. They blamed Moncler, implying that he was incompetent, but all Canadian officials disputed this version of events. They said no flights had taken place in the area that night. Apparently, even Lieutenant Moncler's widow was provided with contradictory versions of the story. The mystery of why the US Air Force is so shady over this disappearance is just as mysterious as the disappearance itself. No matter how much the Canadians denied their plane being over the lake that day, the US refused to back down. Why would the Canadians need to lie about the plane? Why would they refuse to admit the plane has simply gone off course? Are the Canadians the ones lying, or are the US? This has been called the most enduring mystery of the Great Lakes, with many people speculating that the F-89 had simply been absorbed by a UFO of alien origin. Is the USA just trying to cover up what they know about extraterrestrial life? They have honestly shared so little about this story. Pretty much everything you find online is just speculation. The US Air Force have shared very little apart from their original 2 stories. In 1968, there were reports of parts of a military jet being found on the eastern shore of Lake Superior, but this has never been verified and the Canadian government deny any knowledge of this, so it is unlikely. Or if the parts were found, somebody is trying to cover something up here. And then in 2006, some grainy sonar images were published, which claimed to be of a plane lying 500 feet deep in the lake, apparently published by the Great Lakes Dive Company. People online were claiming that they'd finally found the remains of the F-89, but this all turned out to be a hoax. This Great Lakes Dive Company doesn't even exist. To this day, neither the plane nor any trace of it has been found, as far as we know anyway. Once again, maybe there is a very simple explanation to all of this. Maybe Lieutenant Moncler really did suffer the vertigo and his plane just dropped. Maybe there was a plane malfunction. Or maybe there was something weird over the lake that night. Maybe it really was a UFO and the F-89 got abducted. As many of my longer term viewers will already know, I tend to think of myself as very much a realist. I'm a skeptic. I don't believe in any crazy conspiracy theories and all that. I don't really believe in the supernatural. But I do very much believe that there is life outside the Earth. I think it's crazy not to think in the entire universe there might be other life. I don't know if I so much believe that this life, whatever it is, travels to the Earth in little flying saucers and abducts random planes, but hey, humans don't understand everything. Except maybe the USA government, maybe they do know what's going on, and maybe that's exactly why they're so evasive over what happened that night. Out of all of the mysteries in this video, this one is the most baffling to me. This could have been a very easy story about a plane flying over Lake Superior, getting caught up in a storm and falling into the lake and the pilot dying. This could have been that easy. But there's 2 very weird questions here in what was the other blip on the radar and why the USA government being so fishy about it all. But let's focus on something a little less serious for the moment. As with every large body of water, there are stories of a monster lurking in its depths. Lake Superior has its very own version of the Loch Ness Monster, nicknamed Mishipeshu by the indigenous people of the Great Lakes region, the Ojibwa and Cree people. They also refer to Mishipeshu as the underwater panther or the water lynx or the great lynx, sometimes even call it the dragon of the Great Lakes. Mishipeshu is said to have the head and paws of a giant cat, but is covered in scales with dagger-like spikes running down its back and tail. It lives in the deepest part of Lake Superior, said to be guarding the vast amounts of copper found there. According to the American Museum of Natural History, throughout time, Ojibwa travellers have offered tobacco from their canoes to prevent Mishipeshu from stirring up its storms in the lake with its tail and sinking them. For hundreds of years, paintings have been made depicting images of Mishipeshu, the most famous of which being a rock painting from 1850, showing the story of a party of 5 canoes making a dangerous 4-day journey across the lake. There are also hundreds of years of stories, myths and legends about the creature. And just like the Loch Ness Monster, many people have their sightings, their stories. A missionary named Claude Dablon told a story about 4 Ojibwa people who went on a journey to the home of Mishipeshu to get some copper to take home to use to heat water. Except when they did so, the water panther followed them back, accusing them of stealing. All 4 people died on the journey back, the last one just about managing to make it back to the village to share their story before they passed. And then in the 1840s, there was a huge copper rush. It was a time in which many people realised its value, so a load of people clamouring to the Great Lakes to get hold of some. Only a huge amount of these people ended up mysteriously dying on their journeys. Every so often you'll hear a new story in which people saw a strange creature in the depths of the lake. With so many sunken ships never discovered, it's obvious that only a small percentage of this lake has ever been searched. Who knows what else lurks in its depths? It's really not that crazy to think that there may be some creatures in there that are yet to be discovered. Maybe it is Mishipeshu. And just to round this video off, I want to share a cute little story with you to really show the size and the scale of this lake. A story that actually came out just last year. Back in 93, 94, two teachers called Brenda Shell and Bonnie Fritsch did a lesson about the Great Lakes, for which they had a friend make two small wooden boats. On a school trip, they stopped at Brighton Beach to launch these boats, with notes written on the bottom. "I am travelling to the ocean, please put me back in the water. Will you send information on your whereabouts to Lakewood Schoolroom," and then the address. One of these boats, a little red, white and blue vessel, wouldn't be discovered again until October 2020 by a couple who were hiking on the lakeshore across from Eagle Island. They took photos of the boat and made note of the inscription and released the boat back into the water. I don't think they expected this boat was 26 years old when they did so. One of the boats actually spotted a year after it was launched just up the North Shore, but it doesn't seem like anyone spotted either of the boats again until 2020. That's how big this lake is. It's floated around since before I was born, or maybe around the time I was born. I was born in 94. I know this video is a little bit different from my usual mystery content, but I've been wanting to tell a story about Lake Superior for a really long time, so I just took the plunge. I did a very similar video last year about the mysteries of Mount Everest, and people really seemed to enjoy that one, so I thought I'd make this one as well. So please let me know what you think of this sort of style of video. As much as I love doing true crime videos for you guys and feeling like I'm making a difference and I'm helping, sometimes it just gets a bit heavy, you know, and a video like this, it's just a bit, tiny bit lighter. I mean, it's still quite dark, but it's a bit lighter and it's a bit easier for me to make, and it just sort of, I don't know, let me know what you guys think. I'm not going to film videos like this all the time, obviously, but it's just a nice change of pace for me occasionally, so let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.